everyone. Welcome to our third episode of the Hate Read podcast. I am Anna.
And I'm Em. And every fortnight here on Hate Read, one of us challenges the other to a book that we think they'll hate, and we both read it. This fortnight, I challenged Anna to read Chris Harrison's The Perfect Letter.
Ugh.
So, first things first, Anna, did you finish the book?
Barely. By the skin of my teeth.
It's very exciting this week on Hate Read because we are actually in the same city for once.
Yes. Though right now
But
we are sitting in two separate rooms.
We're still recording over Skype because we could not find a room that didn't have massive amounts of echo.
Yes. So I'm like hiding behind my bed right now.
And I am using an ironing board as a desk.
It's beautiful.
All right, so Anna,
Yeah.
would you like to start describing what the hell happened in this book?
Oh my goodness, so much happened in this book. Chris Harrison's The Perfect Letter. So it starts out, we have our main character, Leigh Merrill. Leigh is a very, I guess, famous editor of romance novels, and she has just bagged herself the book to beat all books. This guy, I guess, he was promised never to write another book again, and then wrote a book because she asked him to. So they're having this big party for Leigh. Leigh has a boyfriend named Joseph, who she met when she moved to New York, and unfortunately Joseph is destined to be the Baxter of these books, of this book.
Yeah.
Joseph makes the poor decision to propose to Leigh at this party.
Which is the only thing that Joseph does wrong in this entire book. But we're supposed to hate him, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, we're supposed to hate this poor boy.
I actually felt like I was gonna hate Joseph because of this scene, because public proposals is my number one fear. Yeah, it's spiders, people hiding in the back of my car, and then someone proposing to me in public.
With everybody watching you. So awkward. So Leigh, of course, says no to this. Well, she doesn't say no. She says, "Can we talk about this at home?"
She says, I don't know, what?
So the two of them go home to assumably talk about it, but instead Leigh decides to initiate sex because that's exactly what Joseph would need right now. A woman just turned down his offer of marriage, and now she just wants to sex him. And also decides to introduce him to a kink of hers in a very surprise fashion.
In the worst way you can ever introduce someone to a kink.
Yeah, she throws him down on the bed and ties him up, and this is literally something he says he's never heard her talk about before at all whatsoever. But
right, which also as kinks go, that's a dangerous one to just get into with no discussion beforehand.
Right.
It's not safe sex practices, Leigh. Come on.
Yeah, she's kind of the worst throughout this whole book. Leigh is the worst character in the world. So after this whole botched sexual encounter, Joseph decides to leave. They didn't talk about anything. That clearly wasn't something that Leigh had on the docket for the night. So he goes home and then is back first thing the next morning to take her to the airport because she's going on a week-long trip to Austin, her hometown, to speak at a conference, I think. She's the keynote speaker at a conference for local authors in Austin.
Everyone is super jazzed that this famous editor is rolling on into town.
Yeah, which I guess she has agreed to speak for 5 minutes, and then also to meet with...
Which translates to 5 pages in the book.
And then to meet with everyone who wants to talk to her about their book, which, I don't know. I've never been to a writing conference, but that seems like a lot for one person to take on for a whole week. But okay.
Sure. Also, can we talk real quick about the fact that, like, in this whole first bit where she's like, we're being introduced to the characters and we're being introduced to Joseph, and there's a line where so we're like learning Lee's backstory and her backstory with Joseph, and they're talking about how, like, oh, Lee's parents are both dead, and that's the one quirk of Joseph's that Lee hates, is that he just introduces people, like he introduces her to people as an orphan, which like, how does that even go? This is my girlfriend, Lee the orphan.
She
like,
has no
what
parents.
are you doing? What are you doing?
It's totally cool, you guys. Yeah, he's awkward. But really, like, these are the only two bad things about Joseph.
Yeah.
He's a little bit awkward about her background, and also he did a public proposal.
And I guess we're supposed to be annoyed at the fact that he doesn't enjoy surprise BDSM.
Yeah, because of course the one thing missing from her relationship with Joseph is just that passion, that fiery passion that just drives every love story into the ground. So we find out that Leigh is very hesitant to go back home to Austin, where she grew up, because of some dubious things that happened in her past. None of which she has told Joseph.
Past.
Yes, and she has told Joseph nothing of what has gone on in her past, simply saying that if he wanted to know, he could Google her and find out.
Which is the moment I realized I hated Leigh.
This is like page 13, maybe?
Something like that, yeah, around that. And I'm just like, oh, so she's terrible.
Yeah, not a likable person in the least bit. But basically what we as readers know at this point in the book is that someone was shot and killed in her grandfather's barn. Her grandfather is a multi-millionaire horse breeder who breeds horses that win 1,000 Kentucky Derbies. And
so he has so much money.
Yes, so it's coming out of his butt. It's just so much. And so her boyfriend went to jail over this crime that was committed. So Leigh's first act, I guess, upon getting to Austin is to go and get super drunk with her BFF Chloe, where she runs into this creepy guy at a bar who hits on her and implies that he knows a lot about her. And Leigh won't let her go, and he's trying to force her to have a drink with him and stuff, and being like just super gross about it. But it's okay because Leigh and Chloe just laugh it off and enjoy the rest of their night.
Right.
So that happens, and it is pretty important because, I bet we'll never see that guy again. So the next day, Leigh gives her keynote speech at the conference. So this book is called The Perfect Letter. And within this book, Leigh has published a book called The Perfect Letter about people who write letters to each other. And they're just...
Which was the book that was being published.
Right.
Or that was being celebrated at the big party at the beginning.
Yes. This was the novel of the century, I guess. And it is all about two people writing letters to each other. And she goes on in her speech about how letters are the perfect method of communication, and you can just get such a feel for someone's emotions and thoughts and feelings in a letter, and how the perfect letter was the perfect example of this. And I'm just like, the whole time you're sitting there like, Chris Harrison, are you just like bragging about your own book before it's even had a chance to get started? Like, we haven't even gotten to the epistolary part of this novel yet that you've written.
Also, this whole section is great because it really showcases Chris Harrison's amazing literary knowledge. Part of her speech starts off saying, some of the earliest novels were disguised as letters. It was called the epistolary form. Like, number one, like the first epistolary novel was like in the 1400s, and novels were around before that. Like, so I mean, not really. And then she goes on to list a bunch of examples, which are all like Victorian era, which again, those are not the earliest novels. What are you talking about? And then she includes in her list Wuthering Heights, which is not an epistolary novel.
See, I just assumed it was. I've never read that before.
No, I've read it, but again, I was doubting myself, so I went back and looked it up on Project Gutenberg. I was like, what? And then she doubles down on it because she brings Wuthering Heights up again later in the speech. And I'm like, okay, so you're wrong and you're going to bring it up twice.
I'm going to be double wrong. Going all in. I'm Leigh Merrill, best editor. So while she's giving this speech, she sees her childhood boyfriend Jake in the audience, the one that went to jail over the crime.
Jake.
And somehow she immediately recognizes him, despite the fact that it's been like 10 years in prison since she's last interacted with this boy.
She sees his like bat tattoo, doesn't she?
Oh, does she? I don't know. All I remember was the Stetson cowboy hat. So she runs all around this hotel resort place where she's staying, looking for Jake. And suddenly the organizer of the event comes up to her and is like, "What's wrong? Are you looking for someone? Is it a boy? Here, take my car and go find him." Like, what?
So trusting.
Yeah. So Leigh hops into this little Prius and drives essentially all over this tiny town where she grew up. Like, she just drives and drives and drives. They don't mention her paying back the gas that she used up. So I'm assuming, even though this is a Prius, it's probably on empty.
I think knowing what we know about Leigh, she does not pay for gas.
Oh gosh, she probably, yeah. I have people that do that for me.
Yeah, she definitely would not think, hey, this woman did a nice thing for me. I should fill up her tank before returning it. That's not a thing that would cross Leigh Merrill's mind.
Yeah. Oh, wait, shit. I skipped the part. Hold on. Oh, shit. Yeah, no, I skipped the part. So she doesn't bother Sandra just yet. She goes back to her hotel room first before she hops in the Prius. I forgot. And I guess just so exhausted from her struggle to find this man, and sees a packet of letters lying on her bed. And I guess she just assumes that someone snuck in with housekeeping and placed them there. But when she goes to open up this bundle of papers, it's every letter she wrote Jake while he was in prison. As well as a new stack of letters she's never seen before, which is a stack of letters he wrote back to her with the intention of never sending them.
Which I believe at this point it has been established that Leigh wrote to him for like 4 years and then he never responded or let her visit him, so she just stopped.
Yes, because of course this book includes one of my least favorite tropes, which is two people who can't just fucking talk to each other. Oh god, this book is full of it. So we're treated to our first flashback scene. The flashback scenes were the worst because they were the longest parts of the book and they were so stupid. But we learn about Leigh's background. So Leigh's mother ran off to New York City when she was young and came back unwed and pregnant with Leigh. And of course, mom dies because we can't have any strong parental figures in this book. And Leigh is raised by her grandfather, Gene, who is the millionaire horse breeder that we talked about earlier. Leigh decides at the age of 8 that the idea of her mom running off to New York City is the most romantic thing that's ever happened in the entire history of the world. So she decides that she's also going to move to New York. And the way she's going to do that is by becoming an editor of romance novels at the age of 8.
What 8-year-old is sitting there like, you know what I want to be when I grow up? An editor. Not that there's anything wrong with editors. They're a very noble profession. We need them.
Especially for these books.
but like, that's not a career that an 8-year-old is going to be like, one day I will read other people's works and correct their grammar. Like,
I could understand if it was like, I want to write romance novels. She just wants to fix them.
Exactly. And like, that's a normal thing for an 8-year-old to think, like, oh, I want to be a writer when I grow up because I love books so much. Which, incidentally, that's one of my least favorite tropes, is the author using the characteristic book loving as a way to like get us to connect with the character, because it's like so cheap, because obviously if we're reading the book we like reading books. Yeah. Except, not in this case.
Yes, it's a dumb. Okay, so then furthering this backstory along, Leigh's grandfather hires some new trainers to help out at the horse farm that he runs. Ben and Dale. And Ben just happens to be Jake's father, who has dragged his son from Kentucky to live in Texas in a place he's not familiar with leaving all his friends behind in his last year of school. I mean, it's kind of a shitty move, but what can you do?
Gotta go where the millionaire horses are.
Gotta go after those rich ponies. Jake and Leigh obviously get off to a rocky start at first, and then they end up kissing and shit. Granddad does not approve.
Granddad is unhappy.
And also the other trainer, who is unrelated to Jake, is the world's biggest nasty perv.
Is the creepiest, like, comically villainous character. Just constantly is sauntering up to Leigh and being like, heh, nice tits. To this, and again, this is like a flashback, and she's like 16 to 17 at this time. Even his clothes are sexually harassing people because he has like hats with slogans on them that say like
FBI,
female body inspector.
So good.
And what was the other one?
Don't bitches hate that.
Don't be a misogynist, bitches hate that.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
But this guy's obviously a great dude. And it's weird because, like, so there's another character, well, we've already kind of met him, the creep at the bar. His name is Russell, and he has a larger part that we'll talk about later in the novel. But, like, he's the exact same way. I literally thought by the end of the novel he was going to rip off his face and it was going to be Dale. And they're going to be like, but I thought you were dead.
I think part of it is that it's like a diversionary tactic where they're hoping, or Chris Harrison is hoping that by having these, like, overtly sexist characters who are villains, we're not going to call out the super sexist, rapey behavior from the heroic, quote characters.
Oh my god, yeah, I had a huge problem with every single sex scene in this book. The amount of times the word no was uttered, I did not count, but it was a lot. So then Leigh and Jake make this stupid promise that they're going to get married as soon as she hits 18, and that Jake will quit the farm and move to Boston with her, because of course she got into Harvard. He's going to move to Boston with her, and they're going to be married, and the grandfather will forgive them, because once it's legal, what can you do, right? But of course all their plans go crashing into the dirt because crime happened. Then we get a chapter of bullshit introspection where Leigh takes a complete stranger's car and drives it around town for who knows how long, probably hours, looking desperately for Jake. And wouldn't you know it, she finds him. But then we get a second flashback.
He shows up and she's just like immediately bursts into tears, screaming down her face.
Yep, and is like, where have you been? So, cue second flashback when we get the skinny on the actual crime that was committed. So, it comes to light that Jake has been running drugs for his dad and Dale because, as it turns out, they're not really good trainers, they're just really good at doping horses. So, Leigh discovers this one night, she sneaks out of her room to the barn where she finds Dale threatening Jake's life.
She doesn't discover that they're doping horses at that time, but we, the audience, know that that's what it is because the narrator has told us beforehand. Like, Leigh, like, it's this weird, like, thing where they're flashbacks, but they're keep being, like, references to stuff that happens later. So so the whole audience, like, every twist that comes up, the audience already knows. Like, we already know someone's gonna die. We're already pretty sure that Leigh is gonna kill him, and we already know that Jake has been involved in this drug ring way before Leigh finds out.
Yes. There was no mystery to this book at all.
Because she doesn't know about the drugs at all until the trial.
Right, because he dropped the bomb. So maybe it's Leigh goes into the barn one night because she hears Dale threatening Jake. Doesn't understand why.
Yeah. She, like, thinks it has to do with their affair. Like, she thinks that Dale is gonna out them or whatever to her grandfather.
To her credit, he does threaten that eventually. So Leigh goes to confront Dale and Jake in the barn to go heroically save Jake. She grabs her grandpa's gun, points it at Dale, and Dale starts blackmailing her at that point, saying he doesn't think that Leigh will ever shoot him, and so he's gonna tell Grandpa about this relationship that these two have, and well, what'll happen then?
Yeah, in addition to being comically villainous,
Mm-hmm.
Dale is also comically stupid in that if someone's pointing a gun at you, I know this is kind of a thing in action movies where people are like, you'll never pull the trigger, but like,
Yeah.
don't do that.
Because guess what?
That's a bad
Leigh
idea.
pulled the trigger. And instead of saying, yeah, Leigh, it's better if you admit that you did this out of self-defense, because he was like coming towards you and threatening you and making sexual advances and when you shot him.
Right.
That Jake will take the blame for this, and they'll make up a crime scene and this story about how Jake shot this guy in self-defense because they thought he was a horse burglar. Or something.
Right, like they come up with the stupidest story to cover this up. Like, what if we say we're in the barn and this like guy comes in and we thought he was a horse thief, so we're like, don't come any closer, we'll shoot you, you horse thief. And then he came closer, so we had to shoot him, but then it was Dale. Like, that story makes no sense. Because like if it was someone they knew, of course that person would be like, don't shoot me, I'm not a horse thief, I'm Dale.
Yeah, it's me too. Oh, but he should have known better than to be out in Grandpa's barn past midnight. Which is literally how they rationalize his death. But yeah, obviously their story doesn't work because Jake is sentenced to 10 years in prison for murder and drug running. Taking drugs across state lines or something. And Leigh tries to admit the truth at the trial, but at that point no one believes her, and it just makes Jake look even worse. So she really just messed things up completely.
Then of course Leigh, instead of, I don't know, continuing to try to tell the truth, is like, well, guess that didn't work. Guess I'm gonna swallow this for the next 10 years. I'm going to lie all the time, always. I'm just never gonna tell anyone the truth about this.
I'm just gonna live my life.
Right. I've accepted this.
So, back to present day, Jake and Leigh have had sex at least 100 times. He's in her hotel room. She's late for work because of all of this happiness that's going on. So she's late to work, but she does eventually go to work. And the day's job is to meet with the authors of these manuscripts to see if any of them are actually worthwhile. And along with an author that she does really like his book, she again meets with the blackmailer, who comes in and says, have I got a story for you? And basically pitches his book as Leigh's entire life, and then demands her grandfather's trust fund that he left for her.
Who was the creepy guy in the bar earlier.
Yes, and he was the creepy guy in the bar earlier, and his name is Russell. And the reason he thinks he can blackmail her is because he has some letters in Leigh's handwriting, the ones that she wrote to Jake, where she basically admits that she shot Dale.
Yeah,
and killed him.
But he has like photocopies of them.
Like, why, if you lied to so many people about this crime, why would you put it in writing and send it to a prison? Like, this just seems very stupid. But anyway, it happened. So she goes back to her hotel room and tries to tell Jake about it, or she does tell Jake about it. I don't know, but it doesn't matter because he starts questioning her about the men she has slept with in the time since he has been in jail, and is dismayed to learn that she is seeing Joseph and that she has kind of decided to marry him after turning him down already. I don't know. She kind of like throws it in his face that like he proposed to her. So of course he gets angry and storms off.
Which, I mean, like, the whole idea that he has any right to be annoyed that she has a life is incredibly stupid and frustrating. Like, you didn't write to her for 10 years. You told her to move on. You told her, like, you never wanted to see her again, essentially. Like, what was she supposed to do?
It's been a while. And Joseph is a real nice dude.
Joseph is the best.
Yeah, Joseph is my favorite. So, of course, because this is a romance novel, guess what happens next? Joseph shows up.
Womp womp.
Because apparently Leigh has not been answering her phone for 2 days, and that's enough for him to fly from New York City to Austin, Texas to make sure she's doing okay. So Joseph gets there, and it is very awkward because he's sitting on the bed she just had sex a million times in with another man. And they go out to dinner, and again he asks her to marry him in a public place, and she kind of accidentally says yes. Of course, Russell is there because he only lives to stalk Leigh, and he's really creepy about it all. So then they go back to the hotel room, and Joseph is like, hey, I know how you just wanted me to be more adventurous and outgoing, so let's try that bondage thing you were trying to start the other night. Like, I want to try this with you. I want to grow sexually with you. And Leigh's like, no, she's like, I'm too sore from the quadrillion times I just had sex with someone else.
Right, but like the way she tells him, she's just like, why would you even think that that's what I want? Like, because you just made a big deal about this being what you want. Also, this is the scene where I was just like, just completely done with the rape apology in this book, because in a prior scene, one of the sex scenes between Jake and Leigh, he's like starting to escalate things, and she's like, no, don't. And he's like, well, too bad, I want to. Which,
yes,
that's terrible. But then
tell me to stop.
Right.
But she did.
She did. She said, no, don't. So then in this scene, she goes, stop, I don't, and tries to get away from him. And then it says, he made a noise of frustration and let her go suddenly. He didn't let you go suddenly. He let you go because you said to stop.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do.
He's the only one in this novel that understands consent.
But it's like, apparently that means that he doesn't care enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of issues with consent, they go to bed that night, and guess who stops by the next morning? It's Jake. And so the two of them run off to some closet or something, or like wherever they keep the ice machines at hotels.
I think it's like the little alcove with the like snack machines and shit.
Yeah, because like then Jake proceeds to sexually assault Leigh again. Like he rubs an ice cube over her nipple, and she's like, "Stop doing this, please." Like,
stop it.
Joseph is here, and he's like,
"Please
no,
stop.
Make me stop. If you didn't want me to, you'd really make me stop." And she's like, "No." And then he gets mad and he storms off again.
Oh God, and like he's annoyed because she's like, "Well, my fiance is here." Oh, that's why he storms off. Is he sees the ring and he's like, "What?
Oh right,
You're engaged?" Like, yes, and you knew that this was a relationship that was going on, and if you weren't both terrible people, you would make sure that that relationship was ended before you started getting freaky with the ice machine.
Mm-hmm. Ugh. I hated everything about this book. So, so, so Leigh goes about the rest of her day proceeding to cry to everyone she comes across about what she should do. How can she choose between these two men? Literally everyone.
Even though she's constantly saying like, Jake is the only man for me. I love him so much. He's wonderful and perfect and amazing. And I don't really care about Joseph, but I do love him. Like, nah, you don't.
Yeah, this is clear to everyone but you, Leigh. So everyone apparently agrees with her that she should choose Jake because passion.
And nothing is the start of a stable relationship like hooking up with your high school boyfriend 10 years after the fact.
Yep.
After he's been in prison for 10 years for a crime that you committed.
Oh God, anyway. There's just so many like power dynamic issues with these characters. Just So Leigh decides that
because that's like part of the reason why Leigh doesn't want to break up with Joseph is because he's her boss and she's afraid she'll get fired.
Yeah, she owes her whole life and her career to Joseph, and now he's her boss. So
right. So it's like, well, that was a terrible decision in the first place. Yeah. But also, that's not a good reason to stay with someone.
Yeah.
And definitely not a good reason to marry them.
At the end of this book. So all of this blackmail drama comes to a head when Leigh decides to just withdraw $1 million from her trust account, which the book makes a point, or Leigh makes a point, I guess I should say to Russell that she will need 24 hours notice to withdraw $1 million from a bank. That's not how it works. Banks don't just keep $1 million in their vault. Like, there are other customers, and that money needs to go to other people as well, first of all. Secondly, I don't even know who in a bank you would have to go to get them to sign off and approve a $1 million cash withdrawal. That is like CEO levels.
And as a former bank employee, you would know.
That's not something where they say, "Oh, okay, like let me just
let me just pop on down to our Scrooge McDuckian style vault.
I'm just gonna scoop these galleons into your sack for you from the vault here at Green Gods." Ugh, so dumb. So she goes to this magical bank where she can get $1 million in cash in less than 24 hours. And then breaks up with Joseph and admits that she was sleeping with someone else and that she's just not a good enough woman to be with Joseph because she doesn't love him enough, and he will find a woman that loves him enough eventually, and blurby blurby blur.
And in this breakup, they again try to make it seem like, oh, Jake is so passionate, or sorry, not Jake,
Joseph.
What's his face? Joseph, sorry. They try to make it seem like Joseph is like, oh, so passionless by saying, instead of howling in rage and punching the wall like Jake would have done, Joseph stood very still, his voice going very small and cold. Okay, good. He doesn't have anger issues.
Yes, he's a mature, functioning human being.
A mature person who is listening to this woman who he's in love with say, I don't want to be with you. And he's like, okay, this is terrible, but I'm going to let you do what you want because we are both adults.
Yeah. Joseph is the hero of this story. The hero that Leigh doesn't deserve.
Not at all. Which she keeps saying that she doesn't deserve him. And I'm like, well, at least you're aware.
Yeah, at least you knew. Oh, gosh. So, some stuff happens, but the only important thing that happened is that Leigh ends up giving Russell the $1 million. Like a fool.
Like a fool.
Then Chloe, who Leigh has sent on this awful errand of just like drive around town and find Jake for me, does find him and brings him to the hotel room of Leigh. And they say, hey, I hope you didn't give him that money because we got the letters that he was using to blackmail you with. By the way, he was also my cellmate in prison, and that's how he got photocopies of your letters somehow.
Yeah, because this during her whole giving him the money thing, he tells her that Jake is in on it. Mm-hmm. So she's not sure if she can trust Jake anymore, but then Jake shows up and is like, "You're a moron. Mm-hmm. Why would you believe him? He's a con artist."
Because Leigh's the worst person, and she's stupid and selfish, and just the worst. So they come up with this great plan that they're going to hunt Russell down and get the money back, because 3 against 1 is pretty good odds. Oh, also, Russell is working with Jake's dad, Ben.
Because there's this whole convoluted scheme
so
with...
stupid.
It's like, Jake's dad and Dale were drugging the horses and then blackmailing the people whose horses they were drugging because they're like, oh, if people know that you were drugging your horses, you wouldn't be able to make any money, but we drugged them in the first place, so I'm not really sure how this is your problem, but it apparently is, and that's actually why Leigh's grandfather didn't want her together with Jake, because he knew, because he was being blackmailed the whole time by them. Yeah. So then Jake's dad hooks up with Russ after Russ gets out of prison to like continue their blackmailing schemes. So again, Russ is essentially Dale.
Yes, yeah, just Dale with a different name and skin and body. Um, so they go find Russell's house, which is described as a hoarder's house, which is an important detail.
Me.
Because Jake goes in and lights the letters on fire that Russell was using to blackmail Leigh, and subsequently ends up burning the entire house down, including the $1 million that Russell had geniusly stuffed into the sofa cushions minutes before. And also Russell. He gets burned alive.
He doesn't just get burned alive. Everybody gets out of the house safely. And then Russell runs back in for the money.
For the money that he's already seen has burned up.
For the money. He's like, no, my $1 million. And runs back in. So again, comically stupid.
Very, just, so dumb. And then
Jake,
Ben shows up. Huh?
I was going to say, and Jake, in his pyromania, has also managed to burn his own hands.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so, it's all very Mr. Rochester, Jane Eyre sort of deal at the end here.
Yes, everybody's injured, maimed. It would be more satisfying if it wasn't so stupid.
And also if it was a lasting injury. I mean, not saying that I want a book where everyone dies and or is permanently maimed, but like, okay, you burned your hands, that's not great. But also you burned your hands, you'll be more or less fine eventually. Like, I'm assuming he didn't hold on to the I don't know. I'm just like, this isn't that big of a deal.
No. Except for you all just wasted $1 million
right.
for no reason. Like, it would have been even better if someone got away with the money. Like, it's just so stupid that they burned it all up. Because, yay, Leigh Merrill's on her own 2 feet for once. Doesn't have to rely on her granddad's money that she never touched.
Or her...
She doesn't have to rely on Joseph.
Yeah.
So, I guess it was, like, symbolic or something. But it was stupid. So, Jake again runs off. Because he just can't be with Leigh. And Leigh's like, at first, okay, I'll go back to New York City. But then is like, never mind, I'll go find Jake. Because I love him. And she finds him at her grandfather's farm. Where apparently Jake has taken it upon himself, as someone who caused great scandal at this farm 10 years ago, because he claimed to have killed a man, even though he didn't, but no one else knows that he didn't except Leigh.
And did run drugs.
Oh yeah, and also ran drugs and doped horses, assumably. He goes and he knocks on the door, and Leigh's aunt and uncle work there now. They own the farm. They've taken over the family business. And is like, hey, can I just, like, wander around for a while? I'm kind of homesick. And they're like, sure, come on in. Make yourself at home.
He's homesick for this place that he lived in for like a year. And
yeah.
Was the scene of the worst thing that ever happened in his life.
So, first place he'd go to. So Leigh shows up a little bit later, and they're like, oh, we knew you'd be coming because Jake's already here, and you two just go so perfectly together.
Despite having never seen them together, because they were forbidden to be a couple for the entire time they were a couple, so they were keeping it secret, and then he was in jail for 10 years. So, based on what, Aunt Becky?
So, she looks all over the farm for him, and finally finds him in the hayloft of the barn, which is their secret sex palace where they used to sneak and bang as teenagers.
The bang barn.
He's just hanging up there crying or something behind some bales of hay.
And she goes up there and is like, well, Jake isn't here either. And then she sits down to start crying, and then he's like, oh, you're here, and emerges from behind a pile of hay.
I was here crying first.
Like, number one, why did you not check? Like, you're looking all over for him. You're looking all over for him, but not behind that one pile of hay.
Just a quick glance will suffice. She's not great at hide and seek. So they spend the next 10 or 15 pages arguing back and forth about whether or not they should end up together, including another sex scene, but this time Jake is the one saying no, and Leigh is the one stripping him naked and then stripping herself naked and then, like, forcing herself on him.
And saying, what is it that she says? Hold on, let me find it. Oh, shit. And saying, you want me to stop? Then stop me. Go ahead. Which is a super villain thing to say.
Yeah. It's not flatteringly.
It's not a good idea. Don't say that. Like, PSA, if you are in a romantic situation, never say that.
Yeah. So somehow Leigh uses the magic of her vagina to convince Jake that they should be together forever and end up getting married and have kids. So they decide to give it a go for real this time. But they have no money or jobs because Leigh's quit her job in New York City because she broke up with her boyfriend and has decided to stay in Austin permanently, on kind of a whim, I'm assuming, because her whole life is still in New York City. But decides she's going to open up her own publishing company right there in Austin, Texas, because one doesn't exist already. Her first book is going to be one of the people that she met at the conference that really had no meaningful contribution to this book except
I don't know why he was in there.
Yeah, it was just so that she could say something at the end of the novel about what she was going to be doing with her life, I guess. And then her second book, she wants to publish the letters that Jake wrote her but did not send to her.
Which also these letters are included in this book. Like, we have examples of them. Not good.
God.
Not good.
Not great. Not something. It's basically an 18-year-old boy whining about
the
how
fact that
he doesn't want a girl to see him unhappy.
Right. Like, it's nothing interesting. And also, where could this book possibly go? Because it ends on such a downer. Like, he just stops writing to her, right? Like, it's like...
Yeah. Like, what is the happy ending? Is Jake going to write more letters?
Yeah, like, I'm sure there's no, not even happy ending, but just an ending to that. Like,
yeah.
There's no conclusion in those letters.
Unless his last letter just says, like, okay, I will stop writing you.
Ugh.
I don't know. And then also she's just like, yeah, I'll get a small business loan. That's what people do when they start businesses. Like, girl, you just withdrew $1 million in cash. They're gonna be looking at you kind of suspiciously.
No one's giving you a loan. Also, the way that she phrases that is just 100%. That's like Chris Harrison being like, "Oh, that's what other people do, right?" Like, I don't know. I'm Chris Harrison.
I don't know.
I host The Bachelor.
I got money from TV.
What do other people do?
Oh yeah. By the way, we haven't mentioned yet. This Chris Harrison is the same Chris Harrison that hosts The Bachelor and The Bachelorette.
We mentioned it last week last episode when I assigned it to you, but yeah, we haven't brought it up yet. Which is actually good because there's so much to hate in this book without even that context.
It was just so bad and predictable. And it ended on such a stupid note.
Oh man, but yeah, so that was the perfect letter.
Perfect shitstorm. I hated it.
It was pretty god awful. I mean, like, on some levels it was just stereotypical romance, which, like, I don't want to shit on romance book novels because I do like some romance novels, but it was definitely all of the worst tropes that you can find in a romance novel in one romance novel.
Yeah, there was cheating on a significant other.
Ugh.
There was lack of communication on all sides.
Right.
There was this stupid, like, what is real chemistry and can you be in love with someone if there's no passion? And by passion we mean sex 100 times a day. Like,
when I was, like, looking at reviews for this when I was picking this out, a lot of them compared it to two other books / movies Do you want to take a guess at which two?
No, go ahead and tell me.
The Notebook
Oh, right.
and Sweet Home Alabama.
Oh, that's the Sweet Home Alabama one.
Yeah, I was actually going into this with kind of higher hopes because I don't like The Notebook very much, but I do kind of like Sweet Home Alabama. I'm like, oh, guilty pleasure sort of movie, Reese Witherspoon, all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, Sweet Home Alabama's a book, cool. But then there was this dumb blackmail plot, which was like the entire second half of the book, although nothing really happened. It was just stretched out so long. So it wasn't even like, even if you were into this sort of like idea,
Mm-hmm.
it just went in such a stupid direction. It was awful. Because, yeah, I kind of thought, I was like, okay, this isn't gonna be one of my favorite books, but I might like this more than Anna. This might be an episode where I kind of like the book and I know she'll hate it, but it did not turn out that way.
I eagerly await the day that we do find one of those books.
Right. One of these days, we're going to find a book that one of us actually enjoys, but so far, we're 0 for 3.
Yep.
Ugh.
Oh, gosh. So now that we have kind of shat on the book for a while, is there anything you did like about it?
Oh, I was hoping we were going to do this very last because I literally have not been able to think of a thing. And I'm like, I've been sitting here this whole episode, like recording, going, like, I'm flipping through the book trying to think of something that I liked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just nothing. I mean, I like Joseph. I do like Joseph. But of course, the book hates Joseph. So I'm not supposed to like Joseph, so I don't know if that counts. But if I had to pick a silver lining, it would be Joseph is a cool guy. And actually, um, I think I have an alternate ending for this book that would work so much better and would make me like this book a lot, right?
Oh, okay.
So just imagine this, okay? Imagine that. And so it ends just the way it ends, right? But then there's another chapter where it's a letter from Leigh. And it's like, oh, Joseph, my life has been so terrible ever since I left you for Jake. No one would give me a small business loan, and also both of the books that I wanted to publish were terrible. So I'm making no money. And Jake, because of his conviction, has not been able to get another job. So I wanted to write to you and tell you how sorry I was for breaking your heart low these many years ago, and uh, I hope you can forgive me, and maybe one day we can meet up again and move on together. And then it like goes to like, so like that's the end of the letter, and then it's like a scene with Joseph like sitting in a high back leather chair in his like baller office at his awesome job, and his like super hot wife. Sorry, I'm snorting. His, his super hot wife, who may or may not be Chloe, comes in and is like, oh, what's that, dear? And he's like, just the perfect letter.
And then he balls it up and throws it into
the fire.
Pours some whiskey on it and then lights it.
And that's it. That's the book. So that's my silver lining, that ending I just made up.
Oh, I like this book now.
It's so good.
It's so good now.
What was yours?
I guess my silver lining was that I was very impressed that it appears Chris Harrison wrote this all by himself. Like, I don't think this was ghostwritten.
That was so condescending.
Well, like, you just don't expect a lot from a celebrity author, especially someone who's known for just like hosting reality TV shows. Right. I really wasn't expecting something, but there were moments in the book where I was like, yeah, that's actually kind of a pretty turn of phrase, or that's a decent sentence out of this book.
So yeah, like I don't want to shit on Chris Harrison entirely. He seems
I don't know him.
Yeah, I don't know him. He seems fine. I don't watch The Bachelor. I don't care about.
We're not part of the Bachelor Bachelorette Nation.
Right. I'm not part of the Bachelor Bachelorette Nation. But yeah, like I mean, like it's not that he has no talent at this. It's just that this particular story happened to tick everything that I hate.
Yes. Yeah, like, okay, writing, like, he's fine at writing. Plot, not so much.
Right.
But yeah.
So with that in mind of these characters he's written and created, which one did you identify with the most?
Uh, I think probably Chloe, just simply because she was just there for to be entertained by these people.
Yeah, she was just there to crack wise about their shenanigans.
Yeah.
But like, because I almost went with Chloe too, but she did enable a lot of Leigh's bullshit, which I
This
didn't
is
appreciate.
true. She was very keen to just do anything that Leigh wanted her to do with no questions asked.
Yeah, and she was very quick to shit all over Joseph for apparently no reason.
Maybe just being a good friend.
Right, like her attitude at least was tolerable,
Yeah.
whereas everybody else was just terrible.
Yes, yeah. How about you? Who did you see yourself in?
Mine is a very deep cut.
Okay.
Uh, the character I'm most related to was the prosecutor at the trial.
What?
Who is given no characterization, but also is the only person to question any of this. Because, like, okay, so Leah goes up and the prosecutor starts asking her, "Oh, this is what happened, isn't it? This is what happened, da 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 da, whatever," which is leading the witness, but who cares? And Leigh tells her story and is like, "No, what actually happened is that I got the gun and I shot him because he was kind of mildly threatening to me and kind of sort of mildly threatening to Jake." And the prosecutor is like, "That's not what happened. That makes no sense." Which, same.
Yeah.
So that's the only character I could relate to in this entire book.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of likable characters.
I thought it was gonna be Aunt Becky, the aunt who only shows up at the very, very end, but is mentioned a lot throughout the book because, like Aunt Becky, I wish I had nothing to do with this book. But then she did show up at the end and was super pro Leigh and Jake, so I was like, well, there goes that.
You guys go together like tea and honey, or whatever she said.
All right. So I challenged you. Oh, do we have anything else we want to discuss in this book before we switch topics?
No, I want it to die.
Okay.
I want this book to die. No, I think we covered everything in our discussion of the plot. Like, there wasn't much depth to this book.
No.
Though I guess I can mention, like, Leigh, not only is she a super selfish person, she's also, like, strangely paranoid about people watching her. Anytime anything embarrassing seems to be happening to her, she feels like everyone is watching. Like, hold on, let me find the notes.
Let me also pull up my notes to see if there was anything that I missed talking about. I like the part where she was like, "That's my secret talent, avoiding scandal." And I was like, "You've been involved in at least one scandal, but okay." Which is one more than most of us.
Oh yeah, so here's one of the first example of this, like, paranoia that I found. So Leigh gets a text from her BFF Chloe, and then the book goes on. This last text made Leigh snort out loud, so that the passengers all standing around her waiting for the plane door to open stopped to stare at the young woman in the designer-labeled jeans and bag, her long dark hair cascading in perfect waves to her shoulders, who'd made such an elegant sound. No one was looking at you, Leigh.
Right. I was like, no one cares. Which, again, kind of goes into this whole thing with the famous editor bullshit where the blackmailer's like, "I'm going to sell this story to the tabloids."
No one knows who you
are.
No
one would care. I don't know. But yeah, she's like so sure that the tabloids are following her. And at one point, um, she's talking to Jake and she's like, "Well, how did he know I was in Texas?" And Jake's like, Everyone knows you're in Texas. It's been in all the papers. What papers?
All of them, Emily.
What papers are covering this? All right, so that was The Perfect Letter, which I challenged you to read. So that means it is your turn to pick our next book for me to read, for us to read, for you to challenge me to a read for.
All right. So this one is one of those books where I'm kind of hopeful that I won't mind it,
Okay.
but that you'll hate it.
Okay.
It is a mystery. I know you're very fond of mysteries.
Yeah.
This is a cozy mystery called Shades of Grey by Leigh Simon.
I presume this predates the more famous Shades of Grey.
Let me see. It was published in 2009.
So
maybe.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Barely.
When was Shades of Grey published?
I don't know. It feels like it's been around for forever.
It feels like it was born with the birth of the universe, and it will die when the universe returns to dust.
Simon's tepid... Oh, sorry. Let me lead into this. Here's the synopsis for Shades of Grey by Leigh Simon. Dulcie Schwartz, a 26-year-old Harvard doctoral candidate living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, mourns the death of her beloved cat, Mr. Grey. She's also worried...
No! I'm sorry. Go on.
She's also worried about keeping her temp job until September's grant money kicks in. Nothing, however, prepares her for the stabbing death of her roommate, Tim Worthington, not even hearing the eerie warning. It's so fucking stupid. Not even...
You can't see the face I'm making right now, but it's not good.
Not even hearing the eerie warning of Mr. Grey's ghost before finding Tim. I wouldn't go in if I were you.
Wait, what? Wait, hold on. Okay.
So this is a book.
No, hold on. Stop. Hold on.
I don't want to stop.
So the cat is Mr. Grey and it's dead, but it talks?
It's his ghost.
But it's a cat!
Thus, Shades of Grey. And in the afterlife, this cat has assumably, 1, become psychic, 2, learned to communicate with its owner, and 3, also learned how to solve crimes. Yeah.
That's so stupid.
It's gonna be real good. That's all we have for this episode. If you have any thoughts on The Perfect Letter, if you've read this book and you would like to share your thoughts with us, you can find us on Twitter at HateReadCast, or you can also email us at hatereadcast@gmail.com.
You guys can also follow us on SoundCloud and on iTunes whenever we are on iTunes.
Eventually on iTunes.
If you found this podcast on iTunes, be sure to follow it there.
Yes, and hello from the past.
In the words of Chris Harrison, it was an old story, and the author didn't seem to have anything new to say that would make it fresh.
You done did some good, Chris Harrison.
Good job. Good work, Chris Harrison.